Hi, I'm Wes Copeland, and I will be playing the poet in An Iliad.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Todd, and I will be playing the poet in An Iliad.
Hi, I'm Delta Burke. Just kidding. Hi, I'm Bobby Britton, and I will be playing the poet in An Iliad.
Opening March 19th.
And running that weekend through the following weekend.
So what is the difference between an Iliad and the Iliad? Probably about 16 hours. What I would guess. For me, the Iliad, of course, is the source material, and this is a retelling of the Iliad through the filter of a character called the poet, who may be Homer, it may be me, it may be anyone, right? And really condensing down the story to the themes that the poet feels are most important. The character is compelled to tell the story for some reason, right? And so it's our job right now to figure out what that motivation is and why we have to tell this story, why I have to tell this story. But it's not going to be every detail from Homer's Iliad, right? It's distilled down to the most important parts. And really, anytime there is any kind of stage adaptation, movie adaptation, whatever it is, that happens. The playwright, the authors have a point of view, and they use this source material in order to tell their version of the story. I think that's the biggest difference is theme.
You couldn't call it a piece of the Iliad, I think is one of the things. Like, that would be a silly title, so An Iliad does that. I think that's probably where the title comes from. It is just one aspect. It's that very focused, don't want to give too much away, but kind of a focus on what war does and what obviously rage does to people. So it is a focused Iliad. So they couldn't call it focused Iliad or a piece of an Iliad, so it's just called An Iliad.
Iliad filtered.
Iliad filtered.
Scenes from
Yeah.
An Iliad.
Scenes from a collection.
The Iliad to me feels really specific, and like it happened a long time ago, and we go back to this one specific time in history, and we picture a place. And I think An Iliad and this character's job is removing all of that specificity and kind of putting it in our current situation. And so I think it's a contextualization to remove the and kind of change it to An, where we're not talking about one specific one, we're talking about an Iliad, and it's kind of up for the audience to figure out where that lays for them.
For us, we could almost call it our Iliad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The character that I empathize the most with is Andromache, actually, because this all happens to her. She doesn't. The other characters they're instigating things, they're making choices, they're doing things. But Andromache, the same can probably be said for Hecuba, his mother, or whatnot. But Andromache, you get a little bit more meat in that character, and I feel a connection through Andromache's experience. At the end of that, it gets very sad, and it's some of the most emotional parts, in my opinion, during my performance is when it comes to Andromache's reactions to things. So I think that she's my favorite character to portray.
I'm going to answer it a little differently than you asked, and you're going to accept that. My favorite character that I wait for to get to in the script, just because he appears at a time when we need a little joy, is Hermes. And he's only with us for a minute, but every time I get to it, I'm like, oh, thank God Hermes is here. We can take a little break from what's about to happen. And you'll have to come and see what that is.
If we are looking at who the main character or the protagonist is, right? I mean, one of the definitions of a protagonist is the person who experiences the most change and whose change redefines all of the other relationships in the piece, right? Well, that's really hard on this show because is it Achilles? Achilles is who we start off talking about, right? The very first word is rage. And whose rage are we talking about? We're talking about Achilles' rage, right? So there's a lot of focus on that. What about the poet? What change does the poet go through? What is the poet trying to accomplish within this? And so there's that. But I have to say that if we're asking the question, who is my favorite character in the piece? Who am I most sympathetic with? I think I'm most sympathetic with Hector, because I think Hector is more relatable to a lot of people, because he doesn't have that constant rage. He is dictated more by a sense of duty and doing what is right and trying to do what is right. And then in a critically important moment, a moment that does change the trajectory of everything else that happens afterward, is when Hector experiences rage, right, with Patroclus. And that changes the trajectory of everything else. Once that occurs, and I don't want to give anything away, another very important character, one I talked about before, has a change in course. We know where that character is. That character decides to go somewhere and refuses to leave. But after Hector makes a certain action, Achilles makes another choice. But again, Hector is only trying to do what's right. My goodness, he is defending his home. So I feel a lot of sympathy for Hector.
I think this script is such an opportunity. It's very well crafted, and the story that it tells, I think, is really timely. And I think I connected with it in a way that I wasn't really anticipating to. The story has always felt kind of removed, but it was the first script that I had read in a long time where I couldn't put it down, and I would keep going back to certain parts of it that really stayed with me. And so it was just a really captivating story to me. And then just the range that it requires and getting to go to those places. As one actor in a show, you don't frequently get that opportunity to go that many places in one script, playing one character. This whole rehearsal process has been a really interesting and rich discovery process. Every day is something new, and every time you go back to the text, there's a new little rock to turn over. And so it's just been really fulfilling as an actor to come in every night and just and go through it. And parts of it are really intense. It really takes it out of you. And in itself is a physical feat of what it requires, but it's so much fun to do.
I took on the challenge because of the challenge. How often does a performer have an opportunity to connect with an audience for an extended period of time? It's incredibly terrifying. At times, I still sometimes have that existential dread, waking up in the middle of the night and thinking, it's so long, there's so much still to learn and to really get under my belt, but we're working steady towards it. You don't learn how to run a marathon in one session. And similarly with this, building up that strength, building up that endurance was an incredible challenge. If I can relate to anything, when I played the stage manager in Our Town, was such a special opportunity that I had a chance to pursue, and that chance to connect directly with an audience, for the audience members to be that other character in the show. And I rely on what they give me, and I'm responding to them with the dialogue and the story I have to tell, is a thrilling opportunity. And if it is even remotely like doing Our Town and having those moments of real connection with an audience, that's absolute magic. And you can't pass that up if you're given that opportunity as an actor.
I was brought in a little bit later in the process, so I didn't choose to do the show. I didn't know what I was getting into, but I showed up for a rehearsal and got to see Wes doing some of the stuff at the beginning, early processes or early working through it, and I almost immediately saw how powerful the performance can be. after reading the script, I was like, okay, I'm in. I want to do this. And like something that Wes said, the connection to the audience is something that, from my experience, I haven't really had outside of comedy. A lot of times in comedy, you get to have that interaction with the audience or whatever, but for a dramatic piece, that's kind of new to me, and I really appreciate that as well. So, because it's so, we may not be able to see the audience, but I mean, you are looking at the audience, you are talking to the audience, and you're feeding off of the audience. But that's also sort of how, in my opinion, the poet is compelled to tell the story, is because the audience needs to hear it. So I guess to meander a little bit back to the thing, that's why I wanted to do it. Just after reading it one time, it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of work. It is frightening, it's terrifying, but I think it's going to be very, very rewarding. And it does have, like Bobby alluded to, or talked about those actory moments where you get those chances to do something. Different characters, doing different characters from the drop of a hat, from one scene to the next. I think every actor really wants to try that at some point in time.
We should be able to do this show anywhere. If we were doing it in this theater, yeah, the lights may go down, but I would even think that there could be a choice that we keep the lights up a little so that we have that connection. And we're very fortunate to be able to perform this at the Glen at Brazosport College. So grateful for the opportunity for them to have invited us to come in and do this show so we can do it in a safe environment. But I promise you this, you will see every single person in that audience, And so even though we have to keep a distance from them, again, for safety reasons, that opportunity to make those direct connections is a rare one. That direct address for an hour and 10, an hour and 20, an hour and 30 minutes, depending on how many pages I skip.
52.
How many pages I skip, or how many things I make up trying to get back to it. And who knows, because you won't have the scripts in your hand.
I'm doing a 30-minute.
I've got a copy of it if anybody wants it to follow along with Wes as he's doing his show. It's definitely the memorization. I think because you have to do that. That's obvious. You have to have the words memorized. And then I think that, or the story, you have to have the story memorized. You have to know what you're saying in order to make those connections. And I think that's the most challenging, because it's a lot. It's all me. It's all Wes. It's all Bobby. So having to get to that point, then the real work starts. In a lot of productions, you don't even start, you can back me up on this, some places don't even start physical rehearsals until everybody is off book. So that way you know what you're saying and what's going on before you can get into it. Working here is amazing, but we don't always have as much time for that. So we have to learn the words, we have to learn where we're supposed to be on set, and those connections, those important moments, all in a restricted, due to our lovely friend the coronavirus, it's a restricted environment. So the challenges in this play, more than just learning the words, have also been that environment that we're in, because we don't get to rehearse together like we would like to, so you kind of miss some of that camaraderie and some of those things that do, we don't get paid, so our payment is that fulfillment, that working with Wes, working with Bobby, working with Susan, working with everybody, being able to have that fun. And we're kind of missing that on this show. We get it a little bit, but it's all from that distance. We're all going through that, but the scheduling and remembering lines, I guess, and speaking English apparently has been the toughest part of this for me.
The most challenging thing for me has been trying to release my idea of what this story should be, and like what Bobby thinks it is when he reads it, and really trying to just get in and analyze the text and figure out the story, and let the script do the work. So I definitely, the text, memorizing that is a beast. Never had to memorize 55 pages of words before. And I'm hoping that this may be the only time. But I think what's challenging about this script is how well it's written does require you to go to so many places. On one page you're having the best time of your character's life, and then 3 minutes later that character has lost everything. And so it really requires you to go to those places and to go to them quickly, and you have to go to them honestly, which can be a real challenge as an actor. I think, especially in a piece like this, when it's just you and you have to pop between characters quickly, it can be easy to look really forced. And I think the challenge of this is making it look effortless, which it is not.
I'm going to piggyback off of what you just said, right? Which is the honesty component. Memorizing lines absolutely is physically and just mechanically incredibly difficult because I'm not used to, I've had monologues before, right? But half a page, maybe a page and a half monologue, and it usually drops back into some sort of dialogue. You have someone else to live in the moment with, whereas here we have to live in the moment with ourselves and with the audience, and keeping it honest, using someone else's words, and not just someone else's words. Sometimes the verse, dropping into the verse with the Robert Fagel translation. Sometimes dropping into some ancient Greek. Not a lot of it, but enough to where it you know what I mean? You have to have a shift in your approach with that. And then, of course, when you do have dialogue, because you're playing Hector and Andromache, it's
And the baby.
good dialogue.
And the baby.
And the baby. It's good dialogue. It's the kind of dialogue that I wish I had a scene partner to be able to go back and forth. And so how do you make that shift and keep it true and keep it honest to allow that dialogue to do its job has been very difficult. And the fact is, do we even call this theater? Is this theater or is this storytelling? I don't know. But I think that our main challenge, though, is, like you were saying, is to keep it honest, keep it real for ourselves so that it's real for the audience. And I don't feel like I'm necessarily playing a different character as the poet.
No, it's always presentational.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he switches into a character, he's still himself. He is presenting this character.
Right. And trying to get to the point to where I'm owning what I'm saying. Really owning what I'm saying. Really meaning it. Not just trying to use Dennis O'Hare's syntax that he used at this particular performance that probably got written down for the script. I don't know if that's how it happened, but that's how it feels sometimes. Just inhabiting the story, right? Not necessarily inhabiting the character, but inhabiting the story.
One of the challenges, to go back to the challenge idea, is portraying these characters. Like, we switch into these roles of Andromache, of Helen, of Hecuba, which are all female characters. And I know that especially in this day and age, the female characters probably weren't written as strong as they would be today or could be today. But one of the things that I've been very conscious of is trying not to assume this voice and just be a stereotype, to just be, I don't want that. I don't want somebody to go, oh, look, he's putting on a falsetto voice and flicking his hair and being ridiculous. Obviously that's not what I want. So that's also been a challenge, is to portray these characters in a respectful manner. So, and I hope that we're accomplishing that, except for Hermes.
If there's a message to the play, because the poet continually comes and asks us and checks in with the audience, right? There's moments where we check in with the audience to make sure they're getting it, to sort of have a self-assessment as to how well I'm communicating, right, through the story. And so what is it I'm trying to communicate right now at this part of the process? I think what I'm trying to communicate is that we have a condition called rage that blinds us, that makes us do things that do not promote peace, and that war and death and destruction, all of those things are a result of allowing our rage to take over. Bad things happen when rage takes over. We've seen it all through history, and we definitely see it today. People's emotions get completely untethered from their logic online, and we see people come at each other hammer and tongs, and suddenly you have families busted up. You suddenly have friendships end. All of this because we didn't contain the rage within ourselves. And so for me, that's the message is, do you see? You have a choice. You have a choice.
I really think of self-control through this piece. It was easier for me to connect with self-control and allow the feeling to be a little bit more than rage. Sometimes, and allow that theme and that thought process while we were in rehearsal process for this to kind of seep into all areas of my life. What are the results of the things that I'm doing because of a lack of self-control, right? And definitely going off of what Wes was saying, learning how to control the reaction, right? Because we do have a choice in that moment. When someone offends us or says the wrong thing or does the wrong thing, we have a choice about how we can respond, right? So rage, I don't think in itself is a bad thing. In moderation, in doses, sure, it can accomplish change. But when it becomes in excess and abundance, it can become destructive. And that line, I think, is different for everybody. And so we all kind of have to learn where our self-control level is that doesn't take us across that threshold.
Definitely. The play, what happens to the characters is anytime that they make decisions from a place of rage, there are repercussions. And I think that that's what it's trying to tell us, is that anytime that you make a decision or you have a moment of rage, as Bobby says, rage is natural, it's going to happen. I am the child of a Vietnam veteran who suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. So the poet definitely has PTSD. I mean, that's the way I see it, one of the things that I'm able to tap into. So when you make those decisions from a point of rage, the play very much shows you that there will be repercussions. So the question, do you see, is letting us know, yes, you can have something that you're angry about. You can have something that you're very, very passionate about, but pay close attention to what your repercussions may be for reacting at a moment rather than thinking about what those repercussions are. Because I doubt Achilles really thinks about what's going to happen when he says a certain thing to Agamemnon. I don't think he thought about it, and that's kind of the point. Hector doesn't really think about the repercussions when he stands down before the Scaean gates. These repercussions are not thought about, and the play is just reminding us that we should really think about those things. They tell you don't shop when you're hungry. It's a very similar statement. Don't fight when you're angry. Maybe that's kind of an idea that you could bring back to that. I'm excited as long as Texas doesn't give us more schizophrenic weather. Because if you don't like the weather in Texas, wait a while. I feel like outside is almost, I don't want to say more intimate because that sounds silly because you're out in the open area, but you're sharing the world with the people, with your audience. You can actually connect sometimes better outside because the lights are going to be a little different. You mentioned, you'll be able to see the audience more. And here, a lot of the times, when you're on stage and the way that the house lights go down and your lights come up, they're in your face, you don't see anything. You might see sometimes, unfortunately, the glint of a cell phone, but you don't see the people that are out there. And this is going to be way more, we are absolutely sharing the space with the people outside. There are some challenges, obviously, projecting and how is the sound going to work outside. But I get energy from being outside, so I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be great.
I'm real excited to be back on the stage.
It's been a while.
It's been several years since I've gotten to work in that space. And I really enjoy taking a show to different spaces. I think it keeps you on your toes as an actor because you kind of feel like when you get there, maybe you don't have a lot of time to work in that space. You just kind of cling to what you know. And I think in a piece like this, that's going to be really important. And hopefully we can cling to the words.
I've directed out there. I directed King Lear out there, but I've never actually performed out there. But it's such an incredible space. It's a great stage. You know, it's a really great, live, beautiful space to work. And so I'm excited about that. I have absolutely, you know, coming out of educational theater and having done a short school tour once, something that I learned from those experiences is that, you know, why do we, you know, in theater, why do we teach pantomime towards the beginning when we're a theater teacher, right? It's about bringing the environment on with you, on believing the imaginary circumstances that you are thrust into, right? And being able to do that in any space. And so that's kind of exciting for me because we've sort of contextualized it here within this space. Then that means that it's up to us. Even if we take all of the scenic elements out there, our job is still to bring the setting on with our characters, right? And so that's an exciting prospect. It also gives you the energy of a tightrope walk, which really every theater experience kind of is anyway, right? But now when you're in a new environment and maybe even you've not had a chance to work that space very long, it sort of gives you that tightrope to walk, which gives you a certain energy that when you've been rehearsing something for a very long time may have subsided a bit. And so that's fun. That's a blast. It's a good challenge.
There is some language. It's not excessive, it's not a lot, but there is some language. So if you're sensitive to that, get over it. If you're extremely sensitive to that, you might want to avoid the play. It could be very quickly taken out, very easily if we had to, but it's the way the playwright put it in there. So, and I do think it carries weight. But basically there's 3 bad words that are said, but each time they are used to show that out of control, that the rage that we're speaking about. So those are words that people use. So it has a realism to put that in there. So if you're sensitive to that, be cautioned. There are some themes that I would caution somebody who, I mentioned post-traumatic stress earlier, might be triggered by certain things, but I would say that it's cathartic, or cathartic's not the best word. It might help you. It'll be soothing to you maybe to see this, to think about these things, but it's definitely got some heavy themes in it. I think most children would probably go right over their head. They would say, haha, funny bad word. But we probably want to limit it to 14 or older would probably what we've been talking about.
I think there are some instances of language, but there are some pretty graphic descriptions of violence as well. They don't spare any adjectives. So if that's something that might be upsetting to you, I'd say just be warned that it is a show that encases a lot of rage. And so sometimes that manifests physically for people, and that's what a lot of the story is about. So I think 14 is a good age. But as far as like who should come and see it or who it might be interesting to, I think it's a story that we can all relate to, whether we want to be honest about that or not. I think we all kind of struggle with the issues, which is what makes it interesting to do as a performer. So I think that it's such a powerful story that it really could appeal to anybody.
War is violent, right? And this is the setting of the story is maybe the most famous war in literature. And the playwrights for this did not pull any punches when it comes to the descriptions of some of those battles and the personal experience of a person fighting within it. It gets in their head. And then also the aftermath and the description of the aftermath and the sobering moment. And you may just say, it's just a bunch of bodies, but
these are not just bodies.
These are not just bodies. And so there's a real contrast between those moments of violence and the moments of transcendence that happen. And I will say that this play gives you those moments of transcendence as well, right? It gives you those moments of redemption. It gives you those moments of peace. And as much as it paints the picture of the horrors of war, it also paints the picture of what peace can be as well. And in that respect, it is extremely hopeful. The poet doesn't come on assuming that his actions are going to be futile. Bringing you on this journey is going to create a change, and that change is beneficial. So yes, absolutely, there's some tough scenes in here, but it's so that it can stand in relief against the moments of peace.
You can't warn against bad things without describing bad things.
Right.
Bobby Britton is in it.
Jeremy Todd is in it. You're terrible. You're not a nice person.
I was like, well, it's a gift to the community.
Wes Copeland is in it too. Just so.
I think it is a gift to the community. Like, we don't really have a lot of performance art opportunities being presented in our area right now due to the coronavirus. This is kind of a way where we can do that safely, and the story is really important and super timely, in my opinion. And so I think audiences will find it relatable and entertaining, and I think it's something different for center stages as well. I don't think I've seen anything like this on our stages that I can recall. And so it's exciting to bring something new to the community and to do it in a time where there's not a lot of other opportunities out there.
And see it 3 times. Susan has allowed us to, it's going to be 3 very different shows. Obviously the words are the same, but she's allowed each of us to interpret the way we want. She hasn't been a puppet master director in any way. So I really feel like if you get to see it 3 times, you'll see 3 very different takes on it, and you'll probably get something different from each one of the performances as well.
It's also always fun to watch that high wire act, isn't it? You know, I mean, it's a little bit thrilling to see if someone's going to actually make it across. And there's value in that. I'm not going to say there's not, you know, even if the person up there doesn't know. But no, it's not your English teacher's Iliad. That's for sure. Even if you were sitting here watching this and you've stuck with us long enough on this interview to say, but it's the Iliad. It's at least based on the Iliad. Yeah, that is the lens that we discuss some pretty relevant and immediate things. If you had a really good English teacher, it may be your English teacher's Iliad, but you know what I mean.
It's like the dream lesson plan of the Iliad.
But English teachers still come see it.
Oh, absolutely.
We're not talking bad about you.
No, we're not, because I'm a former English teacher here. It's something that leaps off the page. It had better leap off the page and become very immediate, relevant, and real to the audience. Even if you think you know the Iliad, and if you do come, because you're going to bring so much yourself to it. If you've never even heard of the word the Iliad before, come to it, because it's a really great introduction to the story itself, but it certainly contextualizes it within our modern times and our modern experiences.